Come along with me as I hand make this custom rolling tray out of exotic hardwood. We're building it from a cutoff of a piece of paddock that I was using to build a desk. This piece is a little too large, so I'm going to measure it to be, I believe, 11 inches by 6. Here we're using a measuring tape and a speed square to ensure a straight line across for an even cut. We hold the speed square steady. Next, we're going to head over to our table saw and square up our fence so we can cut the needed amount off the end of the wood. We're only taking about 7/8 of an inch off, so I'm lining up my fence to the blade and using my speed square again just to make sure everything's measured up. Once that's set, we're going to get our wood and we're going to run it through the table saw in 3 passes. Now we're going to create a template to make our tray. We're using 2x4s cut to twice the width and twice the length. And we're going to adjust them slightly to leave a border around the edge of the tray. I'm cutting them down to length. Here I think we used 26-inch length 2x4s and I believe it was 11-inch on the width. This is for the opening in the center. You'll see what I mean in a minute. We're going to mark all our 2x4s and cut them down to size. Here we're doing our side supports. One way I like to measure it up is just to use the piece that I already cut and draw a line on there just to make sure that it's even. Once we've got all the boards cut on our miter saw, we're going to grab our Kreg pocket hole station and get going. We're going to drill pocket holes in the 2 shorter boards on both sides. Pocket holes are great, quick, fast joinery for when you're making just a simple jig or a template. I love using pocket holes for this use. As you can see, I'm almost finished. Last couple of holes here. Goes by super quick, guys. Pocket hole jigs are fantastic. Now we're going to put our frame together. We've got 2.5-inch T20 screws, and I'm using a long extension on my drill to make sure that I can slip through the pocket holes easily. I use a clamp to square the boards together that makes sure that they don't move during the drilling and during the driving of the screws. Here you'll see I'm running into an issue. I'm a little too close to the edge of the table and I try to push it, but unfortunately the fence is blocking my work, and you'll see my mistake right about here. So there I go. I'm going to go move that fence out of the way and bring the saw blade down just so we're safe. Now we can clamp everything back up and keep drilling. Once this frame is done, guys, we're going to mount it to a router table to carve out our tray. This came together really easily. It is a simple project for a beginner who has access to some tools. Now we're going to line up our template on our router table. I'm going to use clamps and try to center it off as best as I can. I like to draw tick marks in the center of the boards so I can use those to match it up to the center of the router bit. We're using a bowl cutting bit here, and we're going to do it in multiple passes. So the reason for the size of the template on the inside is just under twice the size of the wood is so we can leave a lip around the edge. There goes our first pass. Now we're going to go a little bit deeper. It's important to use a good sharp bit for this, guys. When I started making trays, I used a really crappy generic bit, and not only did it burn out a router, but it really wasn't doing smooth cuts on my trays, and once I upgraded to a nicer bit that I picked up from Rockler, it makes a big difference. Much smoother, fewer passes. It's just a better cutting surface. Got one more pass here. We're just smoothing everything off, and that looks great. Now we're using a round over bit on the bottom edge of the tray. I believe this is a 3/8 inch round over. Just going to run that through. It's important to be very wary of where you're holding your material on the router table. You need to keep your hands and fingers well clear of the bit. With a tray, I'm able to kind of contain everything inside in the recessed area, but if you're using flat stock, you need to be extra careful. We've switched over to a chamfer bit now to do the top edges. This is the money shot, so I need to be careful and go slowly. Looking good so far, guys. Here I decided I'm going to do the front edge as well. All right. Now that we've got the chamfer all done, we're going to head over back to our assembly table, get an engineer's square, and we're going to use a center punch to make a few holes we can use for storage. Use our punch, and every 1/2 inch, we're going to knock in 4 holes. I think my first hole knocked the square just a little bit, because you'll see later that the second, third, and fourth hole are in line, but the first hole is a little bit off skew, and that's okay. The person that I'm making this for really doesn't care. Now we're over to our drill press. We're just going to line up to those holes that we punched, and we're going to drill down about 3/8 of an inch. It was requested that a size 1 1/4 cone sit securely in these holes, so that's what we did the size for. Now we're over to the sander. We're going to hit this with 150 and 220 grit. I'm going to hit the easy to reach areas with my orbital sander just to save time, and then I'm going to grab a sanding disc and just hit the detailed areas here, just to make sure that we're hitting all edges and corners and nooks and crannies. Now we're using tack cloth to remove all dust from the surface. This is a very important step that should not be skipped. If you remove all the dust from the surface, your finish will soak in a lot better, and you won't have splotches or whatnot. Brings the wood back to life before you finish it. This is kind of a painstaking process, but as I said, for me, it's one of the easiest ways to make sure I end up with a good finish. So I really take my time. I go around every edge, chamfer, round over, and the inside of the tray, just to make sure I'm getting every speck of dust out of there before we apply our finish. The finish we're going to be using on this tray is natural tung oil. I use this oil for many things. Helps give good color, good shine, seems to last, easy to apply, hard to mess up. I'm just using a cheap paintbrush here. As long as you get good coverage, it doesn't really matter what you're using, as the oil's pretty thick, and you just want it to soak for about 15 minutes before you remove it with a dry cloth. Here I'm doing the base of the tray first. And I'm going to let that sit for about 15 minutes. Now we're wiping it off, getting all that oil removed. And once we finish the base, we can flip it over. Now I can start applying the oil to the top. I always do the bottom first when I'm using finishes. That way, if there's any drips down to the top, I can sort of correct them before I apply the finish. Whereas if I did the bottom last and there were drops, you'd still see drops on the top. We don't want that. So I'm taking my time again just to make sure I get a thick coat of finish inside every corner. every nook and cranny, and I'll let it sit for 15 minutes. After removing the last of the finish, my final step is just to put a little bit of glue on the bottom and add these cork non-slip grips. You don't want your rolling table flying off the coffee table when you're trying to use it. This is an important step. Thanks for coming along for the ride, guys. This has been a blast. Really appreciate you sitting through the video. This is the first of many to come. Have a great night.